Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this webinar today. Today, we are talking to engineers and looking at specifications and their perspective on what makes a good specification, along with looking at the Masterspecs library for SCNZ structural steel design. Today, I'm joined by Craig Bell. Craig is a senior structural engineer at Structus Consulting in Auckland, and with over 10 years of experience in civil and structural design. His project experience is quite varied and includes design of educational facilities, retail, industrial warehouses, healthcare, residential apartments, and car parks. So thank you, Craig, for joining us. Along with that, we also have Kevin Cowie. Kevin is the technical director at SCNZ and a chartered professional engineer and a member of the Engineering New Zealand Society. Kevin has more than 15 years of structural engineering experience and has assisted New Zealand consultants in preparation of multi-level steel construction design options. Kevin has been, along with Masterspec, in the Masterspec SCNZ partnership, he has been a key player and a key contributor in development of the original SCNZ specification, and now the transformation and adoption of that specification onto Masterspec library. So just a quick look at the agenda today. So we will look at the SCNZ structural steel specification with a quick look at the basis for it, and then the basis for the Masterspec SCNZ industry partnership and the structural steel library. We will then talk to Craig and Kevin about their perspective on what makes a good specification, what are engineers looking for in a good specification, and then we will just talk to Craig and Kevin about the value that Masterspec brings in terms of building a good specification as well. And then we'll be looking at a quick demo of the SCNZ structural library on the Masterspec platform. And we'll then take your questions and other comments as well. Just to let our attendees know, the chat option is open. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat. So thanks, Craig and Kevin, for joining us this morning. Glad to have you here. So just to quickly jump in, the New Zealand Structural Steelwork Specification was developed by SCNZ in 2018, and it was a guideline. It is in compliance with ASNZ 5131, which is an implementation tool with an industry-favored specification for structural steel requirements across New Zealand. Now, the New Zealand Structural Steelwork Specification from SCNZ looks at assigning responsibilities and documentation review guidelines, along with qualification requirement for structural steel contractors. Of course, it also ties in with the steel fabricator certification program that SCNZ runs across New Zealand. And it also does matters, it addresses contractual matters that are not covered in ASNZ 5131. It also acts as a guiding document for good sourcing practices for structural steel. And as many of you know, many councils have now started to insist on compliance pathways for that as well. Now, SCNZ has made this document available as a free industry resource in Word and PDF format, and that can be downloaded from the SCNZ website. So looking into the the structure of the document, it has 14 main sections, which covers everything from general and the contractual side of things on to the more technical side, the structural steelwork design, material prep, welding, and then architecturally exposed structural steelwork, and so on and so forth. And then it has got 3 appendices. So what we have done is Masterspec and SCNZ have established an industry partnership to support the industry for these things in terms of writing better specification for guidelines, and to share information for industry growth. So Masterspec is also an industry-owned organization, and our mandate is to provide information and content for the design industry. So we work with all sorts of disciplines, architects, structural, civil engineers, services engineers, and we provide resources for the industry. So this partnership is also aimed at providing further resources for the industry. So the library, the Masterspec SCNZ library, is a specialized application. It focuses on structural steel design specification. It is created and peer reviewed by industry. So we worked with obviously SCNZ and engineer from the industry to create it. Again, it is in accordance with ASNZ 5131, and it has included providing guidance for structural steel contractors and adopted the SCNZ guidelines around requirements for SFC, which is steel fabricated certified contractors, and non-SFC contractors as well. Furthermore, it is an industry resource, so it is a free industry resource for Masterspec structural and civil subscribers and SCNZ members. So if you are an SCNZ member or a Masterspec structural and civil subscriber, this library is available free to you at no extra cost. It also is a resource to implement best practice methods as per industry standards. The library is intended to improve user efficiency. So it uses Masterspec's innovative platform, which reduces editing. It aims to manage your risk in terms of out-of-date documentation. And it also helps increase collaboration between teams through various tools available in the Masterspec platform. So a quick look at the feature of the library. So it has got pre-formatted work sections, which are based on the SCNZ New Zealand Structural Steelwork specification, covering system design and material subjects. It is accessible through a secured cloud platform, and it also allows to manage projects and workflow in a very efficient way. It is customizable, so while it is pre-written with content in it, it is completely customizable to create specs to match your project requirements. There are smart tools for selections like Q&A and editing. It also allows you to create master templates for your organization to meet your project guidelines and practices. It is maintained. So just like every other Masterspec library, it will be maintained by our team of technical writers to match New Zealand Building Code updates and ASNZ standards and contents. And this will all be provided through the automated system of the Masterspec platform. And finally, it is supported by Masterspec. So all the training, IT support, and advice for the industry is covered by Masterspec with help from SCNZ as well in terms of advice. So now what we'll do is we'll talk to Craig and Kevin, so to understand their perspective on the a structural engineer's approach. So Craig, if I may start with you, in terms of a specification, what are the important aspects that you're looking for, or a structural engineer is looking for in a specification?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me along, Yash. Yeah, so I guess the main part is that we previously in an office master sense, we spent a long time on ensuring that the currency was maintained in the specification within the office. I think that what we've found is that Masterspec basically, maintains that currency for us. So that's very important in terms of what we're looking for in specification. Obviously, we're looking to ensure that the works have been designed in accordance with the design intent. So Masterspec offers obviously a lot of depth in terms of the sections and the work that goes into those sections to ensure that we can clearly communicate that to the contractor. And obviously, it references the quality standards that need to be applied to the project.
Thank you. So obviously, what you're drawing towards is the maintenance of content, or the content that's in the specification, and make sure that it's current to meet with the building codes and standards is obviously important. And obviously, the SCNZ specification has been very well received in the industry. It is created by the industry, with SCNZ leading the way. So in terms of the SCNZ specification, we want to talk a bit more about it. How do you see the value coming from it, and what vital or important info does it provide for an engineer specification?
Yeah, so I think what we've found in Auckland specifically is that it's well established now, ASNZS 531, so it's well understood by industry, and it obviously provides a clear compliance pathway for meeting building code requirements. So it's good to be able to have that within our specification. And I mean, ultimately, it defines good practice for fabrication and erection of the structural steelwork, and a quality benchmark. So to ensure that we have a safe structure at the end of the day. Um, so yeah, all in all, I think it was an easy decision for the office to adopt the SCNZ requirements, just as a nice addition to what's already been provided in the specifications.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So, Kevin, just to get your perspective on this as well, being the source for the specification document, what are your thoughts about the same?
Yeah, so um, I mean, as you're aware, ASNZS 5131 is the cited standard within the building code for fabrication and erection of structural steelwork. And so to make it was developed as a tool to implement that standard.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, the specification clarifies the requirements of that standard, because there are certain limits that a standard can't really define levels of responsibility and who does what, but this
Mm-hmm.
specification clarifies that.
Okay. One of the things that also I think comes out of that document is the approach, which is a risk-based fit for purpose approach. And the fact that it can be tailored to the projects based on construction categories. So construction category obviously sort of is the starting point or the jumping off point for any specification, and the requirements that follow based on the construction category. So now that's good to know. And the other thing that, Kevin, I just want to grab your attention on is that the SCNZ document also addresses a lot of things for contractors on site. So, what was the basis behind that? I mean, was there any sort of any background or any requirement that was required?
Yeah, so in terms of requirements by the contractor, like you mentioned, 5131 takes a risk-based approach, takes a construction category approach. So as the construction categories increase, there are additional requirements get placed, and it ties in with our industry quality assurance scheme, the steel fabrication certification scheme. So our steel fabricators are familiar with 5131 and all the requirements. And so what the specification does is it clarifies to the fabricator exactly what they need to undertake to demonstrate compliance of their structural steelwork to the building code.
Okay, thanks for that. And so, Craig, just talking about the construction category, is there a process that you follow in selecting the construction category, or it's pretty self-explanatory
Yeah, so
for
that's a process that's applied to each building structure that we look at. So we take a close look at both the project, the building structure as a whole, and any specific parts that might be subjected to say fatigue or the likes, which might warrant a higher construction category. And what we
Mhm.
find is we can so we can both tailor the the requirements for the project specific to those items or the building structure as a whole.
Yeah.
And yeah, what we have found useful is that Masterspec provides prompts within the question and answer tool function, which allows you to work through that
Yeah.
process within the specification. Yep.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that came out. Like when we did a when we had a look at the SCNZ document and we were looking at establishing this library, one of the most important aspects that came out was the construction category and how the instructions for contractors and obviously the design, of course, but mainly also for contractors changes as per construction category. Um, so the other thing I just quickly wanted to touch upon, Craig and Kevin, sorry, was also the management, the quality management within the specification. So how much of an importance is put on that and passed on to the contractor in terms of instructions as well? Is there any focus on that?
Okay, I'll speak to that one. Yes. So I guess the assumption behind the specification is a focusing on what actually is the critical items. So there's all the upfront things in terms of identifying quality plans and inspection and test plans and so forth. But you also got to, before that, identify and qualify your steelwork contractor.
Yeah.
So the starting point we've taken is that the steelwork contractor is has a steel fabrication certification certified to that scheme.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's not, then there's additional requirements gets placed on
Yeah.
the steelwork contractor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that is again some of the aspects that we have adopted into the Masterspec library, and we'll be looking at that in a short time. So just talking about Masterspec, and Craig, this is for you. For your practice, for your consultancy, any particular aspects of Masterspec that you found valuable that allowed you to bring in some efficiencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, it's definitely the efficiency in it is that we've been able to apply Office Masters for different scenarios or project scales. So we have a small a smaller section of specification for small office projects, and then a larger one that covers the larger building structures that we're involved with. But then beyond that, we can obviously tailor the specifications to meet project specific requirements.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so just talking back to Craig, your point, and I've mentioned before that it is completely customizable, which allows you to build projects based on what you need, based on your project type. So yeah, thanks for that. And based on your initial assessment or just an initial investigation of the SCNZ specification, and there is a slight bit of difference between the approach with the SCNZ specification. What sort of values do you see coming forward through the Masterspec platform? Sorry, this was for Craig.
Yeah, yeah, I think we've sort of touched on it. I mean, ultimately, it's being able to tailor it specific to projects, but clear and concise communication of information to the contractor as to setting project expectations for the construction phase. Yeah, it's during the construction early in the construction phase, we want to set expectations in terms of what information we'd like to receive to ensure we meet our requirements in terms of the observation, construction monitoring role. So yeah, it is ensuring that the quality management systems are in place,
Yeah.
quality plans, all these things that and obviously the manufacturer data records at the end of the process are captured so that we don't find ourselves in a position later in the project where the information is difficult to come.
Yeah, yeah. And Kevin, just touching on the same aspect on from coming from your end, that obviously when this industry partnership was established between SCNZ and Masterspec, what sort of efficiency or what sort of value did SCNZ see in joining hands with Masterspec for this library?
Yeah, no, thanks, Yash. Yeah, no, certainly there's a recognition of a wide use of Masterspec platform, and we could see the really advantages of the Q&A part of it to readily put together a spec that is custom for your particular project. Only the the specificate or the clauses that are specific to your project are brought through, and creates a lot of efficiencies there. So it just seemed a natural partnership with Masterspec.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Guys, Kevin and Craig, thank you so much for talking about your experience and your insight on the library. What we'll do now is we'll have a quick look at how we have transformed the SCNZ document. So we have taken that as a guiding principle and taken the content from the SCNZ document. And as Kevin mentioned before and Craig mentioned before, we've transformed it into a tool set that can be used by engineers to create specifications efficiently with minimal editing requirements, and also making sure that all the content that you need for your project is included. To that, we've included the general sections which allow you to add reference documents, information for shop drawings, schedule of quantities, schedule of warranties, as-built documentation, and so on. Then obviously the crux of the technical sections. So you're specifying your steelwork design, specifying architecturally exposed structural steel, if that is included in the project, and also outlining the quality control requirements. These come with 3 schedules to mirror the SCNZ document, which include schedule of submittals, independent inspections, and manufacturer's data report. So every section here follows the construction category, and apart from that, we've also included some coatings sections which allow you to specify your requirement for painting, metal spray, the corrosion protection, and fire protection as well. So what we'll do from here is we'll jump into the tool set. So let me just quickly jump in. And so that's the Masterspec platform. For our Masterspec users, you'd know that this is it would be a familiar site. For our new attendees, it is all operated through the website. So you just log on using your credentials, and then you will appear at the project dashboard. Just give me 1 second. So jumping into a project, pretty simple, straightforward way of selecting the project. So jump into the SCNZ library, and then, as mentioned before, you can download the section. And as you can see, it starts from construction category. So depending on the construction category for your project, simply select what applies to your project, and then it will ask you follow-up questions for what is required. So Craig, just quickly tapping your insight here. In terms of specifying, what are the key work sections that you look for? For example, architecturally exposed structural steel, do you generally look to specify that, or is it coming through the architect?
Yeah, so we have essentially adopted all sections within the SCNZ, with the exception of architecturally exposed steel. We find that that's normally specified by the architect.
Yeah.
But what we have done is we've also taken on board the schedule of independent submissions, not knowing if the contractor is going to be certified. So yeah, so we take that on board as a section that we bring through, and it may or may not be applied in construction.
Okay, yep, thanks for that. So as you can see, I have done my selections here, and once it's going to download this work section into your specification document based on the selection. There are obviously a lot of editing tools that allow you to edit the sections. So as you can see, we've got specification text here that can be edited to meet your project requirement. Most of it is while pre-written, so it includes all the reference documents, it includes all the references to required codes and standards. And apart from that, it also has got inclusion of product properties, execution, so installation on site. And finally, it allows you to do selection for materials as well. So it's all in here. The main task for you as an engineer is to one, concentrate obviously on the selection, and then obviously curate these sections as required to meet your project requirement. But in terms of selection and in terms of quickly building a specification, it's a very fast and quick system. So that's the library structure as we looked at. And now, as we said before, it is a free industry resource. So for Masterspec Structural and Civil subscribers, SCNZ members, whether you're an engineer, supplier, or contractor, this library is available. So contact us. So you can get in touch with me directly at yash@masterspec.co.nz to arrange access. You can also get in touch with, if you're an SCNZ, and they can help you get access to the library. So you can get in touch with either us or SCNZ, and we can arrange the access for you. We also conduct all the training. All the training resources are available for free. So we will help you set up the library for your organization and also train your team for the use of the library. At this point, we are happy to take any questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. So the first question that's coming through is, can you mix and match libraries? Yeah, of course you can. So if you have multiple libraries available in your subscription, then you can mix them. You can take, and as I think Craig mentioned it before, that in your entire Office Master, you've adopted the SCNZ sections for the structural steelwork design, whereas I believe the other sections would be from other libraries.
Yeah, so I think the way that we've approached is essentially that they are a straight substitution. So if you're looking at the 3410 section of Masterspec in its original format, then that can basically be substituted with the 3410S section, and that's what we've taken through as our Office Master.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Craig. So, folks, is there any other questions for me or the panel today? Then feel free to type them in. Kevin, while we wait for any questions, anything else that you would like to add here?
I guess the only thing is the spec that we developed was based on collaboration with experts throughout the industry. It's intended to be a living document to be updated as new changes are made to standards and so forth. So we are intending next year to have a look again at the standard specification, the SCNZ spec. So we appreciate sort of any comments when you're using the specifications. If you see areas of improvement, happy to take that on board.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Kevin. And yeah, we are always looking to, um, um, take your feedback on. I think I've got a question come through. So one of the question is that how do the updates come through? So Masterspec's team of technical editors update the section regularly based on New Zealand Building Code updates and ASNZ standards updates, or in this case, content update from SCNZ as well. And these updates are rolled out on a monthly basis through a tool set called Update Manager, where the updated content is provided to you as a notification, and then you can go ahead and apply those updates from your end. So in terms of applying the updates, it's a pretty simple process. You don't have to go and look for updates to different documents, codes, or standards. It just comes through automatically through the system. And that's how you can apply it. If you're using a master template for your organization, for your team, then you can just apply the master template, and then every project from there will be automatically updated as well. Any other questions, guys?
So it's just a question that's come through with is the spec better and quicker with the SCNZ? I don't think we've found it any more cumbersome than any other part of the specification, if you put it in that term. What we've found is that yeah, as a process, we always look at construction categories for steel structures. So we're already in a mindset of defining what's appropriate in terms of specification. So I guess this is just another tool set to ensure that our structural drawing, documentation, and specification align in terms of the intent.
Thanks for that, Craig. Now, the other question has come back is, do you have a specific specification for imported and non-imported steel? Kevin, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, so we've been working with the industry on the quality requirements for steel, and you should have seen on our website, we've got a publication there entitled Sourcing of Compliant Steelwork for New Zealand. And there it considers where the steel is originating from. And there's a bit of a process. You identify the certification requirements of the mill in question. Do they have factory production control? You take all these risks into consideration, and that builds a case of whether you need to, and also depending on your construction category, builds of what you actually need to undertake to demonstrate compliance with the standard. So, and if you don't have all those certifications in place, then you're needing to do some specific testing of the steel product. So have a look at our website, and that document is freely downloadable from it for anyone to access. It's actually referenced in the specification.
Yes, so to my understanding, Kevin, that might not be correct, but the schedule of independent submissions that comes as part of the SCNZ specification essentially covers that. So in a general sense of the steel fabricator is SFC steel fabrication certified, then that part of the spec would not be required. But otherwise, there's a pathway to compliance for non-certified steel fabricators.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is obviously more submissions, and it's all outlined in the specification. Yep. Yep. And this is fairly, it's still a new, and it's being explored, isn't it, Kevin, where managing the compliance of imported steel into New Zealand market, into New Zealand projects. I mean, at the moment, every council is taking an approach which is not exactly same across the nation, and Is there any talk around standardizing that process?
Yes, I mean, SCNZ, we've been in consultation with the councils around New Zealand, and so we've pretty much shared our expertise with the major councils in New Zealand, and now we're about unfortunately, because of restriction in travel, we haven't been able to complete our consultation with all the remaining councils, but this is in process. So we're hoping to complete that next year.
Yeah, well, yeah, restriction in travel has put a spanner in the works for so many things. I mean, with SCNZ, even with this particular library that we've launched, we had plans to, visit offices and see you, so many of you personally in person. But anyway, another question that has come through is. Just talking about fabricators, do they like the format that is presented to them, and does it give it a better result or production speed in terms of how information is presented to them?
Question for myself. From a fabricator's point of view, what I understand is that they like to be able to have a standard specifications that they see. So one of the attempts in the SCNZ spec was trying to get a bit of consistency in specification across New Zealand projects, and that's why we're also working with Masterspec in this regard. So going forward, there is going to be more consistency, and I imagine that fabricators would appreciate that.
Yeah, I think because we've been speaking to a lot of our the engineering users who've been using the SCNZ specification, and they see that it should help the fabricator in terms of understanding the requirement or instruction from the engineer on what's required on site, and bring in some efficiency in that aspect as well. So again, we are looking for feedback on this process. It is fairly new. We launched this library in August, and SCNZ has been, and they'll obviously be getting feedback as well. But feel free to get in touch with us if you have any feedback, if you have any insight on this. I think if there are no more questions, then I think this is a good time to wrap up. So if there are any more questions, please feel free to put in the chat box. But look, overall, I think this was a great chat. Craig, again, thank you so much for joining in today. And same for you, Kevin. Always great and always good to have a chat. And look, this is an open forum, so anybody else who wants to share their ideas, please feel free to get in touch with us. We hope to make this a format that is repeated. Hopefully, again in the new year, we can have a chat again, and we can bring this to provide more resources for the engineering community as well. So if you need to get in contact with us or get in touch with me, my details are here. So I think this is a good place to end today's webinar. Thank you again for your time. Again, thank you, Craig and Kevin, for joining in today. And thank you, everybody, for taking your time, the time out and joining us on this webinar. So have a good day, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.